Hello and welcome back to my channel. So when you first learn how to sew, your mind might be completely overwhelmed by all of the possibilities you now have at your fingertips, because you can basically make your wardrobe be anything you want. I know for me, even after I've been sewing for most of my life, I still get overwhelmed by all the possibilities. So today I'm going to walk you through how you can take all of that inspiration and actually turn it into your dream handmade wardrobe. So let's get started with organizing your inspiration. I'm a little bit extra when it comes to this kind of stuff, so you can take what you want from this, but this is my ultimate guide for sewing inspo organization. So I organize everything on Pinterest and Notion. I am obsessed with both of these websites. I love them so much. So Pinterest is really helpful for saving like visual inspiration, where you can organize your boards into subcategories. So that is really helpful. So I have one Pinterest board that is just general garment inspiration, and I've been adding onto this board for like probably 8 years now. So today my garment inspiration board has 2,540 pins. So you don't have to be that excessive, but that's basically where I just dump all of my inspirations. If I see something in a picture and I want to remember one little detail on a garment or something like that, then I'll put it on that board. Today I want to talk about specifically creating like a seasonal handmade wardrobe. It can definitely be a little bit confusing trying to figure out what even is your style. If you've been just shopping in stores for your whole life, you might not exactly have had the opportunity to actually figure out what that style is, because you only have what's in front of you to choose from. But when you start sewing, the possibilities, like I said, are just so endless. So you really need to sit down and figure out, who do you actually want to be? Clothing really seems to me like a way that you can control people's perception of you. And that might sound dramatic, but I'm dramatic. Aside from your actual features or body or whatever, clothing is usually the first thing that somebody will notice about you before you even speak. So your clothing can kind of speak for you, which is why I think it's really interesting. So if you really want to communicate your style, you need to dig down deep and figure out what exactly is that you want to be communicating. So let's get into inspiration. I feel like I've simplified things to a little bit of a formula that you can follow. I don't get a ton of style inspiration from celebrities because I feel like the bar is a little bit low. But in terms of like styled events or stage outfits or anything that's very dramatic, there are some celebrities out there that can be really great inspiration. If you don't pay attention to pop culture or celebrities at all, then skip this step. Obviously this is your own formula, do whatever you want. The next thing that you could look to, I think, is fashion brands. Once you learn how to sew, you're not really held down by any sort of price point parameters. So if you're really trying to achieve something really unique, look to like really high fashion brands, look at runway looks, look at like vintage archive pieces, things like that. Get to know what sort of designers really resonate with you, but then go back into past collections, because you might not really resonate with a designer today, but maybe in the late 90s when they had a different creative director, you might look at their stuff and be like, oh my god, this is so me, I'm in love with all of this. So really do some searching in terms of brands. You could go on Vogue Runway. I'm not sure how far back they put collections on there, but obviously you don't have to just be looking at Runway. Any sort of brand works. The next thing that I think is really important is color. I love color so much. I feel like the general thing that you just have to keep in mind is every time you see a piece of clothing and you're like, wow, I really love that, take note of why. You know, like what is it that really makes that different from other things that you've seen? So is it the color? Is it the silhouette? Is it the fabric? What is it? What is it? Next, I would look at different time periods. This is probably my favorite way to get inspiration. I love vintage fashion so much. I am obsessed with the 60s and 70s. That's where I get most of my inspiration from, I would say, in terms of looking back to different decades. I also really like elements of 90s fashion in more of like a casual everyday sense for my wardrobe. So those are kind of the 3 decades that I like to pull from. The next thing that I suggest you look at, and I would almost take a little bit more inspiration from this than I would like celebrities, and that is fictional characters, because I feel like the mood of clothing is just so much better represented in like television and movies. I feel like clothing communicates more in those sort of forms as opposed to being on a celebrity. Look to your favorite movies and TV shows in terms of costume design, and again, try to pick up different similarities, just always paying attention to why does this stand out to me. So this might all sound really jumbled and overwhelming, so I think a pretty good formula, if you want to call it that, for this would be to pick 3 out of each of those categories and get as specific with this as you want. Like for the 70s, for example, there was so many micro trends within the 70s and so many like subcultures. So really specify, like look at a time period that you're drawn to and then analyze within that, okay, what of this time period is specifically like calling to me. So let me walk you through what I would do if I was making this from scratch for myself. So if we open up our Pinterest board, this will be our main page of the board where I'm going to use this to just generally dump any sort of inspiration I see on Pinterest. If there's just a little detail of a garment or a specific fabric or pattern, maybe not the whole thing is something that I want to emulate, but there might just be a detail that I want to remember, so I'm going to put that here. And then for celebrity or pop culture reference, I picked 3 different reference points, and you can see different examples of these people and different applications of their wardrobe and kind of different ways that they communicate things through that. So I'm looking to work that they've done, any sort of campaigns they've been in, their off-duty looks, and just generally any sort of like visual storytelling that they do through their work and their style. I've chosen 3 kind of high fashion brands, and then within those saved kind of specific collections or moments in time that I really love from those brands. The next subcategory is colors. I think this is kind of the most fun because you don't have to only be looking at clothing for inspiration to make clothing. I get inspiration for colors specifically from literally everywhere I look. I would say 3 colors is still a safe amount, and then pick different examples of ways that you enjoy seeing this color. Then here we have our time period board. Again, I picked 3 different decades, the 60s, 70s, and 90s, and then just sort of highlighted different trends that I really love from these decades. And then we have our fictional characters. On this board, I tried to save things that weren't just the physical garments that a character is wearing, but also just the general mood that's created in different scenes, because clothing is definitely a huge part of contributing to atmosphere when it comes to film. So I think that can extend to real life, right? Okay, now for my 2 very excessive tips, but again, if you're very extra like me, then you might appreciate this. Something that my friends and I did, I saw this idea on TikTok and thought it was really cute, so we all made Pinterest boards of how we see each other. Not that it matters how people perceive you, obviously it matters how you feel about yourself, but sometimes if you really do care about clothing and putting together looks, and if like creating that mood through your clothing is something that's really important to you, sometimes it can be really reassuring to see the way that other people look at you, you know? And that might sound vain to some people, but I don't think caring about your appearance in this way is like shallow or anything. I think it's just another extension of your creativity. So yeah, that can be really fun. If you have someone close to you and you're like, hey, can you make me a Pinterest board on how you see me? And you can do it for them too. It's just a fun little thing to do. And it could also give you some ideas. Like you might not know that that's how somebody in your life looks at you and looks at like your style and the way that you present yourself. And that might, I don't know, you might like what you see. It might allow you to look at yourself and your style a bit differently, which is always nice. Okay, and then the next tip is like really extra, but if you really want to just go all in and create this sort of mood with your clothing, make yourself a playlist. Imagine who you want to be with your clothing, and then like make yourself a soundtrack for that person. It's almost like you're the costume designer in your own life, you know? Okay, now that all the inspiration stuff is done, we're gonna get down to the practical things. So if you've thought that I've sounded crazy this whole time, then this is where I start to like calm down. The first thing we're gonna wanna do is look over all of your inspiration. Out of all of your favorite things within the inspiration you've gathered, what are similarities amongst those items? Like, is there a specific fabric or color or silhouette that keeps popping up in your inspiration and you can be like, oh, well, I know I definitely like that. But make note of any of those consistencies. For example, for me, I notice a lot of things that I save, I really love them because of the print or color of the fabric. I love very like 60s sort of graphics, and I love bright, saturated, like really true color tones. So I know when I put these things in my wardrobe, I'm gonna get a lot of wear out of them because they make me excited and inspired. The next tip I have is to try to narrow down which silhouettes in your inspiration are attainable for the skill level that you have. Especially pay attention to finishes and details on garments, because the very basics of putting together a specific pattern might be really simple, but if you're drawn to garments with a lot of complex finishes, this is going to require a bit of a higher skill level than a 100% beginner. Keep that in mind and try to see where you can forego techniques that you're not quite 100% on yet. Of course, I'm not saying to forego them completely. Practice them, of course, if you love them, but just at first, to not overwhelm yourself. Don't feel like you have to make things that are super intricate. Pinterest is, again, an amazing resource to search for free patterns. So just look up, you know, blank pattern free and make another subcategory maybe on your inspiration board for patterns and save them all to that. You can also just go directly to the link and then save those in Notion. That's really easy too, because then you can save things from other websites too that aren't from Pinterest, and it can all just be in one place for patterns. Mood also has a ton of free patterns. There's so many patterns out there. So start searching now before you actually attempt to make anything, because when you do sit down to actually start your first project, you're going to be so happy that you have all of these saved. It's almost like creating your own pattern catalog to choose from. And if you want to stock up on physical paper patterns, thrift stores are a really amazing, affordable way to do this. Or if you're just willing to spend whatever, then you can just buy your patterns new from a fabric store. Another thing I would do in Pinterest or in Notion is to compile a list of tutorials that you see online. So when you have your fabric ready that you want to work with, you can just, again, go through this list and see what might suit your fabric. I've mentioned this in videos before, but look through your wardrobe and see what you can clone patterns from. If you can lay something really flat easily and be able to trace the pieces, then that's a perfect option. Or if you're getting rid of something for whatever reason, but it still fits you nicely and you like the silhouette, then just cut it apart and trace that onto pattern paper. And always keep an eye out in your wardrobe for things that you maybe haven't worn in a while that can be updated and turned into something completely new that you're gonna wear more. So when you go shopping, I love a fabric store. I could get lost in there for hours, but I also love thrifting for fabric because I just think it's more fun, and of course it's more sustainable, which is amazing. I feel like shopping in fabric stores might be a little bit easier because you just have so many more options. But a few things to keep in mind if you're looking at a thrift store. First thing that I always keep in mind is my color palette, because when everything is so jumbled together, that's going to be the first thing that you notice. And then of course comes the feel of the fabric, how much of it there is, you know, things like that. The next thing to keep in mind when you're shopping is any sort of patterns that you see when you're getting dressed and any sort of gaps that might be in your wardrobe. So for example, spring is coming up next. So for me, I'm trying to think about what do I want to be wearing in the next couple months and what's the most practical approach to getting the most wear out of the projects that I'm making. So for me, my style in the spring and summer, I'm usually wearing dresses, or I'm wearing like old Levi's and like a little crop top like this. So an example of something that would be not practical at all for me to make would be skirts. I love skirts. I think they're so cute. They just don't fit into my personal style. I don't know why, but I do know that it's just something that I'm not wasting any of my time making anymore, because every time I make a skirt, I just don't end up wearing it. Doesn't matter how cute a pattern is, be honest with yourself. If you're not gonna wear it, don't make it. Thrifting is a really great way to test out new silhouettes and see if you can picture yourself incorporating them into your wardrobe more. And if that's the case, then go ahead and start sewing with these patterns. If not, then at least you know and you didn't spend a lot of time and money making those projects. So as you're building your wardrobe, keep in mind what you've already made in the past. So right now for me, I'm working on my spring projects, so I like to keep them all in one place after I finish them. It's really gratifying if you keep them all on a clothing rack or something like that. Then you can kind of see your skill and style improve and evolve as you hang each garment up, which is really fun. But this also allows you to see what kind of techniques and colors and silhouettes you've already used, and see if there's anywhere that you're kind of repeating yourself, that you want to switch it up and make something that might contrast those pieces a little bit more. Or you might like the look of everything being a lot more cohesive. So if you have a specific color or fabric that you really love and you don't mind repeating it, then go ahead and make that out of a bunch of different patterns. Or if there's a pattern that you have that you love and it fits you perfectly, then make that in all your favorite colors. Honestly, people probably won't even notice that it's the same pattern because most people don't pay attention to little details like that unless you sew or are really into fashion. And you can always alter patterns a little bit or add little details to make it different from the last time that you used it. But if you love these little details and you want to keep repeating them, then do it. That's what makes your style yours. I like to think about my wardrobe, especially pieces that I'm hand making, as almost like a little mini collection every season. So I really like making pieces a few months in advance so that I have time to kind of accumulate almost like a little capsule collection that's really, really tailored and suits what I want my style to look like going forward. This also really helps keep in mind like cohesion throughout your wardrobe, so you know that most of the pieces you're making can kind of work really nicely together, but then also have their own standalone moment. I'm not like obsessive about posting my outfits on Instagram. I really like posting on Instagram, but I don't really care that much. However, it helps me in my mind to almost picture these pieces as I'm making them on my Instagram feed, even if I don't end up posting them. But I almost like to think like if I were to post my outfit every day of wearing one of these pieces, would it all kind of fit the same vibe? And that's obviously not to say you have to put your style in a box or anything, but it's just if you want to create like a little capsule collection that's very cohesive, then that's sort of how I like to think about it. That being said, I do feel like most of the time my style is kind of all over the place anyways, so take from that what you will. After the past 2 years, everything that's happened, I think we all deserve to have a little style refresh and just feel good about ourselves. I know I personally am so done with wearing sweats. I just want to make all these pieces and get them out there in the real world. I hope this also gave you some inspiration for your handmade wardrobe. Give it a like down below if it did, and subscribe to my channel if you're looking for more sewing content. I'm posting here every single week, so I'll see you back here next time.